When you hear the name Ariana Kukors, you can't help but think swimmer. She swam for the 2012 United States Olympic team at the London Games. She has spent most of her life around the sport. In February of this year, Ariana published an essay that leveled allegations of sexual abuse and grooming against her former swim coach, Hutchison. She has now filed a lawsuit against Hutchison, claiming that he began grooming her when she was just 13 and that by the age of 16, he was sexually molesting her. The lawsuit also claims that USA Swimming was aware of the inappropriate relationship. I called Hutchison's attorney, Brad Merrihew, but his office declined to comment. USA Swimming released a statement expressing they respect Ariana's bravery and that they will continue to work with Ariana and her legal team through this process. Following the announcement of her lawsuit, I sat down with Ariana for a one-on-one interview. She's married now, goes by Ariana Smith, and she said compared to that difficult day in February, you said today feels a lot different.
Yes.
How so?
So I have been very candid with this process that I'm on. And so back in January, when I decided that I needed to go public, that I had had enough information, that I felt it was important to go to law enforcement, I realized that if I was going to do this, I was going to do it all the way. But I was very much, and still am, in this healing process. I didn't start therapy until October when really all of this began. And so in February, writing what I wrote a 4,000-word essay that was, in my words, what happened, my experience with Sean. And I did a lot of interviews around that time because I promised myself that I would, in order to create different dialogue, in order to hopefully lead to some preventative measures. And it was just emotional. It was so hard to feel like you were just I was burying my soul, the ugliest parts of myself, the parts of myself that are painful for me to sit with, and to have cameras around and talk about these things that another person did to me. And it wasn't, in an intimate setting in a positive way. It was on a pool deck being sexually molested before swim practice. And so all of that was hard, and I would say that the weeks and months after that were some of the hardest, in the sense of I just had to sit with my ugliness, my depression, the anxiety that I was feeling, and work through it and let my pain be my teacher. And I promised myself that I would honor that. But after that first kind of wave, I made sure that I became proactively educated on the system that is there to protect and watch out for athletes. Hundreds of thousands of athletes swim. They walk onto pool decks every single day. And I would say that sexual abuse is not even near the top of the priority list, preventing sexual abuse. But it needs to be at the top. Not every athlete becomes an Olympian. I think the percentage is 0.02% or something. And while we should be protecting, or while we should be supporting those athletes who are on the path to become Olympians, first and foremost, we should be protecting every athlete that walks onto a pool deck. So today feels different because I feel armed with a lot of strength, and I'm proud of myself for getting to this point, to be able to sit here and say, you know what, a lot of people messed up. A lot of people turned their back on a little girl who needed help. And that, in a lot of ways, is my cry for help, is that 15-year-old, that 16-year-old, when a report or a rumor was being passed around, there's so much more to that report or rumor. There's a child behind that needs help. It's not an image problem. It's somebody who's in danger, who will continue to be affected by what's happening to them.
I talked with Ariana Smith about the recent timeline, which only takes her back to October 2017. When you had therapy, then January came the realization. You said that's really when you finally realized that what happened was wrong.
Yeah.
And then it was February you came out with your announcement.
Yeah.
So all those years have passed, and people will undoubtedly sit there and question, well, what took you so long?
Yeah. I love that question, and at first, when I was asked that in February, it hurt me, because in the place I'm in now, I want to scream, like, why don't you get this? Why don't you understand, like, what the actual abuse is like? And while you're in it, and I was candid with this, Sean programmed me to act a certain way, to wear certain things, to behave around him in a certain way, to behave to others in a certain way. And it really wasn't until October when I was able to sit with a therapist and talk about, what had happened. And it was layer by layer. Like each day I would walk in and tell her a little bit more, and then the next day a little bit more. And at first it just felt like I was reciting my life story. And at first it was, yeah, you know, I come from a family, I have 3 girls, and, you know, it was the PR version. And the next day, maybe, you know, a little bit more, a little bit deeper. And it actually wasn't until January where I had hit rock bottom in my depression. And it was January 5th, and I had one of the worst days of my life. And I woke up that morning and I realized that I needed more information. I needed to understand what kind of person Sean was. And so I started calling people that knew him, others that were intimate with him. And I realized that the story that Sean had told me for 10 years, that we were in love, that I was his one true love, that he had sacrificed everything for me, I realized that that wasn't true. And so I decided that I needed to come forward, that I needed to start writing. And so each step has led to a different layer of healing. It's led to a different layer of understanding. And what I would say is I'm 28. I'm married to an amazing man. We got married in August, and I have a great life. But that doesn't mean that the trauma that Sean inflicted on me is just gone all of a sudden.
It's still part of your story.
It's still a part of my story. It's a part of me. And I think a part of, you know, these last few months has been me trying to show myself more grace, because I speak to myself very poorly, very rudely a lot of times, saying, you know, like, get over it, you're fine, get up, put your big girl pants on, you know, you're gonna get over it. And I mean this honestly, I had to let my pain be my teacher. And I had to sit in it, and I had to respect it, and let it wash over me and be painful and be ugly and be claustrophobic and suffocating in order. You know, I couldn't go around it. I'm having to go through it right now because I want to put this behind me. I hope to have a family one day with my husband. I hope to be able to be a great mom, to be a great member of the community, to have great relationships and friendships. And I know that this is a part of that process.
As Ariana Smith continues to process what she says happened, I asked her if she thinks she'll ever be able to put those moments behind her.
I don't know if I'll fully be able to tie the bow on a box and say, you know, I'm going to put this over here. The question I continue to go back to, especially in my darkest moments, is why me? Because I believe that Sean had a plan for me, with me.
What was that plan?
To control me and abuse me. And I think that he liked the power that he held over me. The fact that I truly was his puppet. I would do whatever he wanted. I left the Olympics the day after. He didn't want me to wear certain things in public, so I didn't. He wouldn't allow me to talk to certain people, so I didn't. I went to the University of Washington because he wouldn't let me go out of state for college. You know, he controlled every aspect of my life.
And some of those things, some could say, well, that's just a coach trying to watch out for you and make sure your image is protected and all of that.
Yeah, and I think, you know, it's a great point. What I would say about college is there are so many people who swim to 18 and then go off and have a college experience and go swim for somebody else and have amazing, illustrious careers. And that could have been the same thing for me. And so that would be my response to that is yes, in some cases, maybe it's best to defer a year, you know, to stay with a coach. And obviously, there are great coaches out there. And it's unfortunate that great coaches and horrible coaches take up space on the same practice fields, pool decks, wherever else.
Smith says she's honest in her hope that these actions will lead to prevention. She wants to hold those named in the lawsuit accountable.
One of the steps that I've gone through these last few months is realizing what happened when I was 15 years old, when I was 16 and 17, and I was on the national team, and Sean was sneaking me away from the team hotel, and he was sneaking me around and kissing me and touching me, and, you know, people had to see. You know, there were actions that should have been taken when I was underage, but also the investigation that took place in 2011 after the story came out in 2010 about Sean. And even though I wasn't named, it was assumed that I was the athlete that Sean was having a relation with. You know, I believe that more needed to be done, but wasn't done. I was left in harm's way. You know, in 2011, the private investigator that spent maybe 10 minutes on the phone with me asked me 18 or 19 questions, and then that was it. That was my part. No one flew out to meet me. No one offered anything in the form of therapy, or nobody asked me, are you okay? Do you need help?
It was just a phone conversation?
It was just a phone conversation. 19 questions, I believe.
Sean Hutchison responded to Smith's initial claims in February with a statement from his attorney that read, At no time did I ever abuse Ariana Kukors or do anything with her that was not consensual. The statement also read, I absolutely deny having any sexual or romantic relationship with her before she was old enough to legally make those decisions for herself. Prior to that time, I did nothing to groom her. Why do you think he would come out and even say that?
There's a criminal investigation ongoing, and I would say that the specific language that he used in that statement is trying to keep him out of jail. And, you know, based on everything that I've said, based on everything that happened to me, Sean deserves to be in jail. And so I understand why he would issue a statement like that. From a logical perspective, what I would say is when I was 15 years old, when he started abusing me, that's when my intimate and my emotional maturity was stunted. And so when he, quote unquote, entered a consensual relationship with me, I was a 15-year-old who knew nothing more than to want to please him constantly. And, you know, I understand where his statement comes from, and I completely disagree with it.
Finally, I talked with Ariana about her hope that, as she said, these actions will lead to prevention so that no one else has to experience what it's like to sit here right now. You said the time for statements is done.
Yeah.
That you're tired of statements.
I am.
What do you ultimately want to achieve by sharing your story?
Yeah.
I mean, is it you want to see him go to jail, or is it something different than that?
I can't control whether he goes to jail or not, and I'm very aware of that. I trust that law enforcement and that the criminal investigation that's ongoing will do their very best. And I support and respect those who are doing their job there. I said this before, but I want to say it again. When organizations like USA Swimming do their own internal investigations, it means that law enforcement's hands are tied behind their back. They can't do anything. They can't get the information in time. This would be a different story if it was 10 years ago and this was being reported and the Department of Homeland Security were running an investigation into Sean. Because imagine what kind of devices he had on him. Imagine what kind of evidence he had that would have been a different story than 10 years later. And so, you know, I have a hope of many things. I have a hope of some closure for me and understanding why nobody had my back, why nobody cared about me, a little girl. But also, there are others being abused right now. And I don't believe that USA Swimming has their back. And I think that if you had told me a few months ago that I would have filed a lawsuit today, I would have said that you were crazy and I would never do such a thing. But I want to believe the best in people. I wanted to believe that USA Swimming was wanting to protect me. I don't believe that to be the case. I think that they knowingly kept me in harm's way, and I feel very confident about that. And I think that they need to have the accountability to step up and say and take ownership of that, and that they need to understand that changes need to be made in order to prevent this moving forward. It can't be number 5 on the priority list. It can't be a small program within USA Swimming that is there to protect athletes, because there are pedophile coaches, and you know, showing them a video that says you shouldn't touch young boys or girls is not enough. Parents need to be educated. Athletes need to be educated. They need, and I want to be a part of this. I can tell you probably notice I get fired up when I'm talking about this because I want to be a part of this. And you know, the next phase is really to understand what those programs look like, how we can talk to athletes and really sit down. No one sat with me and said, Ariana, are you okay? Do you need help? Are you in danger? Nobody sat down and asked me that question. And I imagine what would happen if we were to create programs where, whether it was myself or others, can sit with those athletes, can go around and talk to other athletes and say, if you're in danger, first of all, this is inappropriate. Your coach taking you behind closed doors, inappropriate. Your coach touching you in this way, inappropriate. Leaving your hand on your back, massaging you, it's not inappropriate. That's what massage therapists are for. That's what chiropractors are for. And I just hope that we can continue to educate. You know, the victim is very rarely the one who's going to raise their hand and saying, this person's abusing me. Why? Because they're still being controlled. I'll never forget this day, and I wrote about it in my essay. It was 2010. I had just finished Christmas. It was December. I was on a layover in Houston. I was on my way to see Sean secretly on the East Coast. And that was when the article hit the press that Sean was having a relationship with one of his athletes. Who do you think the first person that I spoke to was? Sean. He told me to turn off my phone. I asked him, I was freaking out. I said, should I fly back to LA where my home was? Should I fly to Seattle where my family is? He said, no, fly to me. So I got on the plane, I flew to see him. We ended up going to Hilton Head Island where we spent a night or two. He was on the phone the whole time, and he instructed me exactly what to say to people. And the first thing he said when he got there was, "We're in love. All will be forgiven when this is all said and done, when we can go public, when we can have kids and have a family together." That was the life that he was promising to me. And so raising my hand and saying I needed help, raising my hand and saying this person's hurting me wasn't an option, because he had wrapped his manipulation and control in a beautiful love story. And fortunately, in January, I was able to burst that love story and realize that it wasn't love, that it was manipulation and abuse.
Thanks for watching. I'm Scott Carty.